Do you really?
I thought I would like it.
What's it, the name of it? Oh, Coast Farm. Oh, I read it.
Hey, did you start it?
No, you know, I'm reading Calgary, because I read it about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I read it a bunch of years ago, but I did not want to read it. I'm about 30 years, I did not want to read it. It's good. Yeah. I like it. I like it. So I hope I can finish it before the,
My son,
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Dishonest Truth Lecture Series. I hope you all enjoyed the last month. I hope it's very informative to you and may have told you some things you may not have known, and maybe it may encourage you how you can maybe want to explore and to look at some things that you didn't know. And but anyway, we are so glad to have you, and hopefully that this lecture, along with the one that was held last month, will lead us into our final lecture in April with more enthusiasm. In May, this is it. And want to know, we have next month Colonel Herman Cole, who is a colonel in the United States Air Force, retired, and he is very, very good, as all of the lectures are. Very good, very informative, and knows his stuff. And so, some quick housekeeping, please note the video, the audio recording of this, and if you want to see this, and some friends who may not have come out, did not see it, you're able to access this on YouTube, on the Dishonest Truth channel on YouTube. So, without further ado, I had a prepared statement on telling you who our next lecturer is, Ms. Dana King. And I started thinking, like, you know what? She's going to tell you a little bit about herself when she starts her lecture. And I don't want to override that and have everything repeated twice or anything. Lots of you went to the Dishonest Truth channel and read about her. And you, of course, have probably been just as amazed as I was when I saw her out to make sure that she would be able to be one to give a lecture. Very, very, very good at what she does, very informative. And I hope you'll come out of here looking at things a little differently and hopefully with some knowledge about things culturally, and how it's looked at through the media and what she does. So anyway, without further ado, I want to present to you Ms. Dana King.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so glad to be here. I see my people are here. The folks in the back row, that's me. Pastor in the front row, I get that. All right, I think we're good. We're safe. We're good. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful Saturday. No rain, no wind. So I doubly appreciate you being here. My role today is to provide an experiential accounting of the history of broadcasting and its influence as a business as it relates to Black people. There are all types of media that we can all access at this point: radio, print, television, podcasts, social media, subscription and non-subscription services alike. And the media landscape is changing every day. I will provide information this afternoon about the broadcasting media's impact on its viewers based on their importance to the bottom line, which I will get into after a brief introduction as to why I am here today. So thank you for allowing me to share a bit about who I am. When I was a child, my mother taught me a very simple formula for dealing with challenges that required an answer. She told me that whatever the problem is, that I should speak to the person who had the authority to fix it. Don't go up the ladder, start at the top. Little did I know how far that would carry me into my future as a broadcast journalist. by the time I was retired in 2012, after working in Los Angeles, St. Louis, New York, and San Francisco. I say was retired because I didn't choose to retire. I was fired because I refused to dye my hair. At that time, I was the anchor of the Monday through Friday 6 and 11 p.m. broadcasts, which were the #1 broadcasts at the #1 station in the 10th largest market, San Francisco. But that's a story of patriarchy, so that's not on here yet. That's another time. And for background, during my 25 years as a broadcast journalist, I reported on all kinds of local, national, and international news. I was in Rwanda after the genocide, the Gulf War I aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan to cover voting rights for women. I was in Iraq and Kosovo post-war, Ghana, West Africa to investigate the true stories of women held captive as witches in caves. I was in Mexico to report on the connections to women disappeared and violently murdered as part of structural femicide. My kids call me the disaster queen because I covered climate disasters in Honduras, El Salvador, Taiwan, and Turkey. And I was the first West Coast broadcast journalist to report live from New York City, a day and a half after September 11. How we even got to New York from San Francisco is a story worthy of a book, which I can now write. But for all of that and much more, I was awarded 5 Emmy Awards, 2 Edward R. Murrows, and 2 Gracie Awards presented by the Alliance for Women in Media. But before becoming a broadcast journalist, I was on a whole different career path. I spent the first 5 years out of college working as a Time sales rep. I sold airtime at the #1 station in the #2 market in this country, in Los Angeles. My goal was to run a TV station because that's where the power was. And since general managers always came up through sales, I was well positioned. I loved it. And that's the side of the business that I plan to talk about today, the business of broadcasting. Broadcasting is a business that runs on cash. When I was in sales, it was a cash cow, making 70 cents on the dollar in profit, with advertising as its primary source of revenue. When television first started to take off, though, the industry reported a loss of $25 million in 1950, and it grew to become a $68.7 billion business by 2022. It's facing significant headwinds right now due to new technologies, digital media, ever-changing consumer habits, and ownership consolidation like the ones we're seeing with the billionaire class who buy media properties. Think Larry Ellison and his son, who will soon control the following: TikTok, CBS, NBC, or CNN, HBO, Discovery Channel, BET, Cartoon Network, Comedy Central, DC Studios, Fandango, Miramax, MTV, Nickelodeon, Paramount, Pluto TV, never heard of that, Showtime, TBS, The CW, TNT, Warner Brothers, and more. That's a whole lot. And then there's Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, and Elon Musk and other South Africans who are early investors in information-based Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, YouTube, and Reddit. And if you don't think these social media accounts are used for news sources, ask a college student, ask a teenager. That's where they get their news. I taught broadcasting in San Rafael at Dominican University for a few semesters. And the first time I asked kids where they got their news, and they said, TikTok. And I said, I'm sorry, what? TikTok? Oh yeah, everything. I don't read a newspaper. I don't watch the TV news. Well, there's news to me. Regardless of the dynamic shifts in the media landscape, the regulatory landscape for broadcasting remains intact, no matter the industry headwinds or tailwinds. The Federal Communications Commission, however, is currently operating in rubber stamp mode when it comes to this administration. The Ellisons are just one example. They're not being sued for antitrust violations, and yet they own that swath of media. The FCC is designed to regulate all media, and came into being more than a decade before television began as a staple in middle-class homes. One early regulatory policy called the Fairness Doctrine became law in 1949 and made equal time for politicians and political commentary mandatory. It is no longer in existence because it was abolished by the FCC in 1987 under the Reagan administration. It was in the news not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, when a talk show was challenged by the administration for violating the Fairness Doctrine. Then they invited now Texas Senate candidate James Talarico onto the show and demanded that his Republican challenger get equal time. Anybody recall that story in the news? Talarico hadn't even won the primary to even become the challenger at the time they demanded this. I never saw one news report by many who know much better that said that the Fairness Doctrine was no longer law. So they talked about it as if it was, and that's what's called clickbait. We're gonna bring you in, suck you in, tell you a story, and not tell you the whole story. Because the Fairness Doctrine isn't even law anymore. Other regulations that were codified by Congress and implemented by the FCC set caps that limited station ownership, and it started with the 777 rule. It was adopted in 1953 and allowed a company to own no more than 7 AM radio stations, 7 FM stations, and 7 TV stations. In 1984, that rule changed, allowing ownership to increase to 12, 12, and 12. The reasons for these rules were to prohibit a concentration of ownership, keeping a healthy level of competition, which in theory was designed to stimulate more diverse television programming. In 1990, the ownership cap rules were abolished and television entered the land of deregulation until 2004, when a new ownership cap was implemented. The difference was that the station group could own as many stations as it wanted, but the station group could not reach more than 39% of television households nationwide, and that was the difference. There are 210 television markets across the country from which to choose. This new regulation wasn't based on the ownership group's aggregate programming ratings and tracked by TV and radio research firms Nielsen and Nielsen Audio, formerly called Arbitron, but rather just on the population of households with televisions in the United States. So this is a list of all 210 TV markets. And just to get an idea of how many stations you could own to reach the 39%, if you bought a TV station in the top 5 markets, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Philly, you'd only reach 18.6% of the country. These percentages for televisions in these markets, the 50th market is New Orleans, and they reach 0.53%. Okay? So down to El Paso, which is the 89th market, 0.30%. You can buy a lot of TV stations to reach 39%. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. One major thing, remember the last regulatory changes, 2017, opened up to 39%. And one major thing that came out of the 2017 rule changes was a program called the Diversity Incubator Program, as a way to diversify media ownership. The program had been discussed for decades, and when it was finally brought to a vote in 2014, it didn't pass. It wasn't adopted. 2014. But the FCC has always claimed a desire for policies that encourage 4 types of diversity that are interconnected, meaning if you take one away, none of them matter. The first is the diversity of viewpoints, with the availability of media content reflecting a variety of perspectives. The second is diversity of programming, what kind of shows run on TV stations. Outlet diversity, to ensure the presence of independently owned media. How many stations do you own? Where do you own them? Minority and female ownership of broadcast media outlets. So let's take a look at a result, my opinion, you decide, of what happens when there is a lack of diversity, of outlet diversity, that is designed to ensure the presence of independently owned media and therefore independence of thought. So I have a little video here, instruction on how to run it. There it is. I'll just play it.
So,
Thank you.
Well, our greatest responsibility is to support
Eastern Iowa Communities.
Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that City of Fort News produces.
But
We are concerned about plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets
Without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 To our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you're good. Don't worry.
Okay. That's something to quote. To be told what to say as a journalist is the day they should quit. They didn't. So this is extremely.
Sorry.
So these people work for the Sinclair Station Group, which is one of the largest media ownership groups in the country. I've seen that now over the last few days, I don't know countless times, and it just disturbs me to my core. That would have been the first time I got fired, I'm sure. Anyway, now I want to drill down into the landscape of media ownership. We're going to find out about these 4 FCC rulings and how they play out in the country. This information is according to the FCC's 7th report on ownership of broadcast stations. The data was consolidated in 2023 and reported in 2025. So these stations are both full and low power. The two levels of broadcast ownership. So this is a consolidation of potential full and low power stations. Full power stations use network programming, the big four: ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. And as you can see,
Sorry.
we're going to go back to that other slide.
Okay.
Well, the majority of ownership and they've considered it majority ownership interest. It lands in the lap of white people. The second largest ownership group is the non-Hispanic Latino, and I'm going to put Hispanic Latino into the category, and it takes it up to 78%. And this, I think the significance of Hispanic ownership numbers are likely associated with the international network, Telemundo. Now we can go to this one. We're going to drill down a little bit deeper. These are only full power stations that we're going to look at now. And we're just going to look at race.
there's an extreme lag, so I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to start talking about it, and then it should populate again. So there are almost 1,400 stations in this category, and majority ownership based on gender, race, and ethnicity, voting interest that exceeds 50%, either individually or collectively. The largest ownership group, white people, they own 992 stations. Of these 210 markets, they break them down into the television markets 1 through 50, 51 through 100, and then 192 living 10. And the majority of white ownership is in the 1 through 50 markets, the biggest television markets. The second largest in the white ownership group is markets 101 to 210, at 77%. The second largest group ownership in terms of number of stations are owned by Black African Americans, and they cover 3.1% nationally of all TV stations owned. And the majority of their ownership of stations is in the 101 to 210 size markets. Interestingly, the indigenous and Alaskan Native station groups own 30 stations, and 12 of them are in the largest markets, and they cover 2.2% of station ownership. Native Hawaiians, the Islanders, 0.01%, and then the no majority interest is actually the second largest category at 21.5%. So this is how it breaks down of the full power stations that carry mainstream programming in this country. The rise of television as a cultural experience started with the very wealthy. TVs were starting to become a big-ticket purchase item in American homes, and if the average family income in the 1950s was $4,000 a year, and a television set cost $1,000, it was a financial commitment that only the upper middle class and the wealthy could make, or the upper class and the upper class could make. A decade later, prices started to stabilize, and by the 1960s, 87% of our households owned a television. I remember our first TV. It was a Curtis Mathes, and it was a piece of furniture. It was like a credenza. And I only remember the name of it because my cousin's name was Curtis. And I don't know if he was named after the TV manufacturer, but we sure teased him on TV. Looking at income from the latter part of the civil rights era, from 1967 to 2024, the trajectory of income by race has increased, obviously, while remaining fairly static amongst racial groups, and then the disparities between the groups remain fairly static. Black households have always had the lowest pre- and post-tax income of all racial Black people have yet to build generational wealth, as we are also the lowest home ownership rate of all races. Home ownership is the foundation of generational wealth accumulation, and the lack of it obviously started with enslavement and a racially discriminatory tax on Black property owners that resulted in disproportionately resulted in tax delinquency, forced sales, and land dispossession, undermining Black wealth then and now. Such statutes evolved into theft by eminent domain, redlining, predatory lending, and other systemic racist inventions and intentions. I read an article yesterday that in Marin County, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, that home sales, let me rephrase that homes are switching hands based on inheritance. 1 out of 4 homes in the entirety of Marin County is going to inheritance. That's extraordinary. Black people don't have that option. Not being able to widely participate in the American dream of home ownership mattered in the world of television advertising too. In the 1960s, the civil rights movement targeted advertising as a platform issue because Black people were not solicited as consumers by advertisers, just used in stereotypic ways as caricatures to undermine class and race distinctions. 2 examples: Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben Rice. Those 2 caricatures served to assure white people of an idealized racial pecking order in the midst of immense racial upheaval. It meant nothing to white advertising companies if these 2 products were not purchased by Black people, because they weren't advertising them to Black people. We could talk about this category until the cows come home. But to suffice it to say, the money from advertising on television stations at the height of the industry's economic ascension did not come from products advertised to Black people. So Black people were and still are ignored as an audience. Since money fuels programming, and that money comes from advertising, stations direct sales attention to the needs and desires of the majority population. The more they watch, the higher the ratings, making more and more money for programming that impacts the bottom line. Television viewing by white people was normalized as the gold standard of advertising then and today, a hallmark of proof of performance that has been the goal in the industry since the beginning of broadcasting. And I want to look at something we've already looked at. I want to look again at the FCC diversity file, diversity of viewpoints, as reflected by the availability of media content reflecting a variety of perspectives. Content comes from people, their interests, lived experiences, worldly interactions through travel, education, and a host of intangibles that catalyze how you see the world based on how the world sees you. As a journalist, you come to work every day with story ideas that are either approved or not, and even if approved, make it to air or don't. 2020 statistics from Data USA reported that white students are the recipients of 58% of journalism degrees. Yet a 2022 Pew Research Center study reveals that more than 75% of journalists are white. 8% are identified as Hispanic, 6% as Black, and 3% Asian. Add all of this to the fact that 74% of broadcast media is owned and run by white men. Diversity of programming, as indicated by a variety of formats and content. The goal of federal broadcast oversight is twofold: to foster the development of the commercial aspects of the industry and to ensure that it serves the educational and informational needs of Americans, which also include programming initiated, produced, created, and programmed by and for various minority and ethnic groups. Television news is in and of itself a loss leader. In an industry built on cash from ad sales and subscriptions, regular day-to-day news coverage is expensive, and budgeting breaking news is nearly impossible. It costs what it costs to cover it. Mobile equipment and excess transport fees, tariffs, airfare, vehicles, interpreters, security, hotels, per diem, personnel, satellite transmissions, all of these and much more blow up a budget and override a newsroom's fixed costs. In terms of the FCC mandate to program to its minority audience, have you seen a correspondent go live from the Sudan, which is right now embroiled in war? Its people are starving again, and women and girls are being violated daily. The Sahel, where a group of nations are working together to break free from the shackles of the international banking system. And Nigeria, when the U.S. worked with the government there, with the military, to handle some issues on the ground. Many saw and read about white South Africans that were given elevated status as victims recently to emigrate to the United States. But we never learned the other half of the story, as publicly would like to say. Did local stations and national stations even pick up local correspondence reports from South Africa? No. And are they now reporting as vociferously on the return of South Africans? Or the return to South Africa by many of those same South Africans? No. So why were none of those stories I just mentioned deemed worthy of being covered, even though the proportion of this country's minority demographics continues to grow, along with interests outside of our borders? The decision makers are still predominantly white and men, which leads back to the beginning of the circle and the question of outlet diversity. So outlet diversity ensures the presence of multiple independently owned media outlets within a geographic market. So now we're going to look at a slide of the top station ownership groups in the country. And I think you're going to be stunned. We saw the easy dismantling of diversity of thought from our Sinclair group in the video. And Nexstar station group is the #1 station group in the country with 265 stations. After the FCC had Brennan Paw allowed them to recently purchase the Tenga Group, it gave Nexstar approximately 80% coverage of the television markets, putting them not only in violation of the FCC's rules of 39% coverage, but possible antitrust violations. Coming in second is Sinclair. Sinclair has 185 stations. The station group, again from the video, Brain Media is in third place with 180 stations. Fourth place, EW Scripps Company with 61 stations. Fifth place, Hearst TV has 30 stations. And the only black station-owned group rising to this level is in sixth position, the Allen Media Group, owned by Byron. They used to own 28 stations, but sold 10 of them last year to number 3, Brain Media. So they only have 18 stations. And to the FCC goal of minority and female ownership of broadcast media outlets, that's also in the no category. The best example visually, again, the Sinclair video, where it showed a yawning gap in racial diversity of news anchors. There were plenty of women in rather tight dresses, but in that sea of people, there were only, I counted, 4 black news anchors. Bottom line, all 4 of these aspirational FCC goals are hallucinatory. Somebody is smoking something, and if they think that we think this is what success looks like, they're wrong. So you might ask, well, what can I do? What can a viewer do? Find out about the station group and contact them. Every letter that they receive, they consider it to represent dozens, if not hundreds of people, because people don't write anymore. Do some homework about how they stack up with regard to the FCC list of diversity. Complain, write to them, call them, contact the source. Number two, stop watching TV. Is that possible? If it's not feasible, select independent sources to connect with. These are my list of sources that I read and watch. They're either online, by subscription, or they're free. So I watch Mehdi Hasan, who's a former MSNBC journalist, it's MS now. He runs Zeteo and Mehdi Unfiltered. Jackie Singh runs Hacking But Legal. Empathic Revolutionary, This Week in Democracy, Sean King, The Card Catalog, which, okay, I love them all, but this is my favorite. This is run by a librarian for the AI age. Dr. Stacy Patton, she's an amazing writer. She's a journalist and professor. She teaches at an HBCU. And Joyanne Reed, who's a former MSNBC journalist. Read as much independent journalism as you possibly can. I read the Level Reports. It's a subscription-based program, and they do investigative reporting. The Associated Press, free. Been around for, forever. Read Reuters. You can just Google it. ProPublica is a subscription. It's an investigative online source. I watch Al Jazeera. It is a great news source that looks at the United States from outside of our borders. And it shows us how we're perceived around the world. I worked with Dan Rather, and he was the news anchor at CBS News. And people wrote him after 9/11 and said, how did this happen? How are we under attack? And he felt that it was the network's fault because they closed down the newsrooms around the world. And they kept open London and maybe one other newsroom. And they had to cover the globe, which is an impossible task. And he felt like the lack of coverage internationally that came from an American source kept people in the dark. So, The Guardian is another one. It's a British newspaper. It's very progressive. International Intrigue. It's an online source. It has a stupid name, but it's really good. It's written here in the United States. Ground News. It analyzes where the story ran, whether it was a conservative outlet or a liberal outlet, to what degree, how, and so you can see the balance of the pieces of information that they put forward. And you get an idea of that stories, that individual stories, larger audience, who's reading, who's watching. So this next bit of information comes directly from the Card Catalog Library. What to look for when evaluating your news source. So now you're on all these different news sources, but how do you determine that they are quality? Can you see their editorial standards? Do they publish a code of ethics? Ethics or editorial guidelines? Do they explain the standards that their reporters are held to? Can I see their corrections policy? More importantly, do they publish corrections when they screw up? And where is it located? Do you have to dig for it, or is it fairly obvious and easy to find? Who pays their bills? Is it ad-supported, subscriber-supported, donation-supported, publicly funded? Whoever pays the bills matters. Can you see their sources? Can I see their sources? Do they name them when possible? Do they explain why sources are anonymous? Do they link to original documents? Can I see the difference between news and opinion? Is it clearly labeled, or is everything just a lie? If the answer is yes to what you're looking at, then you're starting with a reliable source. They may not be perfect, they may not even be unbiased, but they're accountable. And that's powerful. Next to the identifiable problems, also Single anonymous source with no documentation. Anonymous sources can be legitimate when they face a risk. Let's say they'll be fired for speaking out. Okay, I get that. But credible stories corroborate their information with documents, data, or other witnesses. One anonymous source with nothing to back it up is a red flag. Claims designed to make you mad. Outrage is the most profitable emotion online. If a story seems engineered to make you angry at a particular group or person, stop and ask whether that emotional response might be the point rather than the accuracy of its information. Breaking news with no news source. Now, this is about newspapers. Reporters put their names on stories that they reported and verified. When breaking news has no journalist's name attached to it, it often means that it hasn't been through the normal editorial review or fact-checking process. Information, and this is crucial, especially nowadays, that information that cannot be found in any other credible news source, whether they deny that it exists or don't mention it at all. If a story makes a significant claim and no other news organization has reported it, confirmed it, or even reported that they can't confirm it, it's suspicious. Major news does not stay exclusive very long. So if that story has been up all day, it's not true. Screenshots. So when you look at a news source and all they offer you is a screenshot, you can't click on it, that means you can't get to the original source. Where did it come from? Screenshots can be doctored, taken out of context, or cherry-picked from longer documents. Link always to original sources because it lets you see the full context and verify the information yourself. Vague attribution, we do hear this. Experts say, or many believe. Okay, credible reporting names specific experts and explains their qualifications. Vague phrases like these can hide the fact that these experts are actually unqualified. That only one person said something, and maybe nobody said it at all, and they wrote it themselves because it's their opinion. The musician Jim Morrison said, "Whoever controls the media controls the mind." So true every day, not just today. It's not just people doing the reporting. It's the people who own the stations, program its content, hire everybody, regulate the industry, and decide what gets put in front of readers, and listeners to digest. It's the business of media, and it is a system.
David, come on. Wow. Thank you very much. So,
Is there, where's that other noise coming from?
that's another lecture.
What is that?
Wow. I know, by looking out into, the audience, I heard a lot of, and me personally, I wrote something in, that had to do with the area of, businesses in the network. So now's a question and answer. If anyone has a question, about something, please, raise your hand and we'll let you. Is it smart? I know.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, please, raise your hand and we'll get to you. But I do have a question. And so, what ways can programming be made for blacks and other minority audiences that may or may not be driven by the mainstream advertisers.
Are they on? Yes, I'll take that.
Okay. You want people, thank you. That's a good question. Like news is a loss leader, it costs money. The stations lose money when they run the news. Perfect. Television makes a lot of money. There's a greed component that denies programming that doesn't make a lot of money. That's just the way it is. And that's the pick up the phone kind of call moment. Ask for programming that is diverse. Ask for programming that reflects something you're interested in and want to see. I think there now with the onset of digital media, podcasts, YouTube, everybody seems to have a YouTube channel. There are other ways to program that don't rely on the big four. And this is new, this is a whole new environment, and I think people are they're coming into their own with it. When Mehdi Hasan was fired from MSNBC, he was off the air for months, and his voice, I missed his voice. And so when I found out that he was starting his own entity, I didn't even know what to call it. I mean, I watch it on my phone, right? I was thrilled because he now has a way to enhance international news and pay reporters to be on location and to have his own station, if you will. So I think that we have to, those of us who are interested in programming alternatively to what is out there already, we have to look at these new media sources. And so I think that, I really think it won't kill the mainstream media, but it will hurt it. And it's hurting that. The advertisers now have more sources and more ways to reach people very specifically as opposed to broadly, which is kind of what TV does, is for advertisers you're going to reach a whole bunch of people that aren't made by your product, but they're going to see it, right? So these are the media sources, this is the general media, is very specific. And I think that and you can make a living doing it. And you won't be tied to working for I don't think I'm a man. Because I never worked for a woman in 30 years in this. Never worked for
Oh, okay.
Is it more impactful to
You wanna wait
contact?
for them? Does she need the mic to be on?
Is it more impactful to contact the station and the station owners, or is it more impactful to contact the advertisers?
I think all of them. I mean, seriously, you could CC them all on one email. The advertisers absolutely need to hear it. Because most of the advertisers on broadcast need a large audience, right? So if people boycott them and a specific group boycott, it may impact them for a minute, but then the boycott ends. The boycott to Target ended. Somebody decided it was over. I'm still not shopping there, but so yeah, I think it's really important that they hear that you're angry with that, and that whether you buy their product or not, that you're gonna stay on that. So I don't think you can go wrong reaching out to any.
Okay.
It's work. It is work. But I think it's really important right now that we.
In one voice. Yes.
You had the BET was purchased Sinclair?
Yes.
When was that?
Just recently, that just went
So
through.
it's too early to see its effective effect.
You know, back in the seventies, companies used to buy companies and then just dismantle them. It has a name, I can't think of it. But, other than, but, they may take half of that list and those networks. It'd be interesting to see what they do with that. I wonder if it was like part of a package or something. I don't know that they like picked out what they wanted necessarily. They may have come with a larger ownership. BT might be owned by, let's say Warner or something. Yeah. But we'll see. Not hopeful.
Okay.
I think if I was looking at the groups that are down there to a point concerned, what stations they own, I'm not sure that's what PBS owns.
No.
And so because I know they are independently funded, and they list a lot of who funds them, and then I would say, therefore, they have a lot of freedom. That's not, I think, expression to what I see. And so I looked at a lot of programming, and that was really good. And then it was, I don't know if you're familiar with, Professor, Karen Hunter or Clay King, and they from the Urban Review, they said no to watch, these stations that are owned by these majors, and so that became problematic. That's okay. I didn't get a lot of recommendations, but they were saying don't try to get your news source from them, and so it's good to see where we can get, and so thank you. So I thank you for bringing all this up. I really do. Thank you.
That's not an exhaustive list. That was just me going, I watched this, I read that, I listened to this. So I'm hopeful that you have a list yourselves of different sources. PBS is under fire. The government wants to defund PBS and Sesame Street. Yeah. It's public broadcasting. I did not include them. But yeah, they're still a good source, but, and whether, I think it's important whether we watch them or not, that we support them financially when they have, viewer drives and, things like that too, because we can, it's important.
Wow, yeah, it's like you don't know where or what to watch anymore, especially with with the lies and falsehoods, should I say, that are out there. How they mask it and they make it seem is that.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Everyone on YouTube, we're sorry about that. So I have a question also about the why don't movies like the Black Panther and Sinners translate into more similar television programming?
Yeah, you'd think it would, huh? So back in the 80s, The Cosby Show, 5 out of the 8 years it ran was the #1 show. Not the highest revenue producer because it didn't, that involved syndication and merchandise and all kinds of stuff. But it was a big ticket item. If you wanted to advertise in Cosby, you had to buy a run of show, a run of station almost. They wouldn't let you cherry pick and just advertise in Cosby. Otherwise they'd have one show with, full of ads and the next 4 would have none. The funny thing about the Cosby Show is is that it ran on NBC. It was offered to CBS first, and CBS said no. They turned down the Cosby Show because they didn't think it would make them money. That it wouldn't be well received, it wouldn't be a popular show, it wouldn't rank with the quality that exists on their line. I don't know if anybody got fired over that over the years, but they sure should have. So I say all that to say that even when we have something of exceptional quality, like the Cosby Show, okay, this is before we all knew about it. It was still the only one, right? It was still, they didn't even have a spin-off, until years later, and then it didn't do very well, because it had taken too long. So, the networks are run by the people who program what they want on there. They promote it, they spend money on it, and it lives. It should be a direct line from the big screen to the small screen. But it hasn't happened yet. And we have one. At the end of it, we didn't get another. When Cosby ended, we didn't get another Cosby. So, what is required is that there are all kinds of people who come from all kinds of backgrounds and who have different experiences hired by these networks and station groups, so that there is a diversity of thought. Because that diversity of thought becomes a diversity in program. And until we do that, it's going to be the same old thing.
Yeah, so,
Samantha, she has a mic.
oh, okay.
She has a mic.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
has the mic.
Do you think that at some point in the past 50 years, there's been a change from programming, origination, securing advertising, to the inverse happening, where the type of advertising, especially the heavy pharmaceutical advertising, has changed programming?
Wow, that's a deep, good question. And I think it's changed programming. I will say there are categories that are not allowed on TV. And it used to be booze, and that's bad. The proliferation of pharmaceutical advertising is unbelievable. I think it does, I don't know, I think it supports, programming. I think it supports the creation of programming. I don't know if it supports the content of that program. But without that money, we wouldn't have these stations wouldn't have the programming and the new shows every season that they do.
But I do think that, I'm just gonna pick on the pharmaceuticals. I think it would be a different landscape if we didn't have that money. So loud all the time. I do think it,
I think it would change the landscape.
I don't know.
I don't have a TV, so don't really, I don't even know what popular shows are. I don't know if the proliferation of medical TV shows, I think there are more now. I don't know. That's a really good question. Thank you. You can tell
a show is doing based on its advertisers. When you see Rolex or Mercedes or some high-end product, you know that the demographic for that show is wealthy people, right? When you see the 90-second commercials, like for animal rights or feed the children, as important as those 90-second commercials are, they get them for like, a nickel on the dollar. And they run them because they don't have other advertisers. And I'm astonished at the programs that still run these 90-second commercials. I don't have a TV, but I do watch 15 minutes of news at 6 o'clock. And I'm struck by, and I watch MSN, whatever it's called now, by how many 90-second commercials they have. But that's a 24-hour station. They got a program for 24 hours. My mom had Alzheimer's, and in her latter years, we fixed it, but she would watch the news. She'd watch CNN. And they re-rack the hour every 15, 20 minutes with the top of the news again. And every 15 or 20 minutes, my mom would get so upset. Oh my gosh, that's terrible! And so we realized that she probably shouldn't be watching the news. So we switched her to Westerns. And that didn't work really either, but that's another story. But yeah. I think, yes,
I have them right now.
Okay. All right.
Making a mess. A couple of, real quick comment first. I know on a much smaller scale, the problems of getting programming on. The problems of getting programming on based on the problems of getting, as JD knows, a show on a stage in a community theater. Yeah, it's really tough, and the shows that are at least bit controversial are the shows that are really hard because it doesn't fit someone else's idea. But aside from that, actually, two things. I know that news is a lost leader, it always has been, and I've always known that. But knowing that, how do the stations that are 24-hour news, how, other than programming what they say is news, which is really entertainment, how do they support themselves? How can, if a legitimate news source can't pay for itself, how can these others pay for themselves? And the other thing is, with the wide variety, all of the things that you listed as to what should be red flags as to why this isn't true news, how do you apply that to all of the podcasts and the one-ofs that are out there?
That's a good one. Okay, so I'll answer the first one. So the 24-hour news, like CNN, they have people everywhere, right, all across the globe. They may not necessarily work for CNN. They may get paid by the story. So so that's one way that they keep their costs down. The other way they keep their costs down is that they don't pay their people like the mainstream media does. You've got people making, Rachel Maddow, thank you. Rachel Maddow makes, I've heard like $30 million. I hope that's wrong. But people get paid millions and millions of dollars
And they get paid that I worked with an anchor in, Los Angeles, Jerry Dunphy, who drove to work in a Rolls Royce. He got paid. He was making $1 million in the 70s. So there's that personnel, payment, schedule that's markedly different between 24-hour newscasts and advertising, mainstream advertising supported television. And their other costs are the same. They don't pay their crews the same amount of money. And then they do have a handful of shows that are very popular. And the advertising in those shows is significantly high. But, and they buy programming. Instead of producing programming, they'll buy programming. And that's way less expensive than programming a news show or any kind of show yourself. Some of them may come advertiser supported. So there are a host of ways that they can program for 24 hours to keep their costs way down. So that's
And I'm sure that the fact that, well, they're repeating it every half hour, they're not producing new news.
Right, so there's that, yeah, the replication of the programming that they do. And the other question was,
How do you apply?
to podcasts, yes, thank you. Same way, the same way, because you have immediate access to these people. You just slide into their DMs and you ask them, who pays your bills? Is it all subscription based, or do you take advertising? When you make a mistake, how do you rectify it? Do you rectify it on the air? Do you put it on your website? So I think that in many ways we have better access to the people who are in new digital media now than we do with mainstream programming. I gotta say, it's hard to keep up with email. And I started in news when people mailed you letters, right? And I gotta mail you a letter back. It didn't happen as often as it should have, but now we can reach out and directly tap into these people. And I think the same standards apply. The same standards apply. Now some of those that I mentioned, they're very left-leaning. I know people that watch both sides of the spectrum, just so they know what's being said, what's going on, topic-based, right? I'm not that person. I don't have the bandwidth to sit, because I'll argue with the phone, or, or the computer, and you don't ever want to watch news with me, because I'll be like, why'd you ask this? So I think the same standards apply. And the immediacy of their money can take them off of the air quicker than a broadcast situation that's gone south. Other than like the Washington Post, when Bezos bought the Post, people dropped their subscriptions, and they're giving it away now. 30 cents a week for the Post. When it used to be $100 and some a year, and I dropped the Post. I also dropped the New York Times. I'm super mad at them. But I get my news. But the standards apply across the board. Thank you.
So I heard you mention Al Jazeera was one of the sources you used for your news. I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that they're funded or owned by the Qatar state government. Do you feel that their coverage has changed in any way since that government made a very large, they gifted Trump a giant plane, very highly valued? Do you feel that is introducing bias into their coverage of America?
Well, it makes me, I'm concerned about it, absolutely. The government funds PBS, right? So they left them alone, I felt, before that happened, and I'm hoping that they will continue to leave their broadcasters alone. I think that the news that's happening now in the movies, is so bad that all you can do at this point is just show the pictures and talk about it. There's no context right now. Because it's happening so rapidly. When we get out of this mess, I think then we can get more deeper into how they report. But I think it's so awful that the fact that they are on the air in places of such danger is remarkable and worthy of attention.
Right. To speak to that, I think that, like you said, they have access that a lot of the West has been locked out of. So just the fact that they can speak from those places, I personally, I get a lot of input. And I think it helps.
That's a great point. And I will say, as a black woman, in the list of places that I've been in the world, I can be invisible. I can just listen in. Where other people cannot. When I was in Afghanistan with a scarf on and appropriate clothing, people would speak to me in Urdu. I would just smile and not open my mouth. So there's also that as well. But we can't, not only are we not allowed to send our reporters into some situations right now, they're not going to get the same directness. And there's always a cultural barrier that we have to understand. And it comes from the language, not English.
I have one question.
Do you have any suggestions on how to reach that large segment of the American public that actually prefers going to dishonest media sources because in order to feel good about their own biases?
Well, it goes both ways. They'll say that, why can't you watch what we watch, right? But we're broken. I feel like we're broken. My partner's parents, they're both gone now, who I knew of, drifted off into the abyss of Fox News. And we lost them. We loved them, but we lost them. And I don't know how to answer. It's profoundly frightening and profoundly sad that we have become so enamored by the need to be told what we need to hear that we shut out other people. And to that I will say, it will change when this is over. I can't see us continuing like this. feel like it can't go anywhere. It just can't. Because don't misunderstand this. I was at ground zero for September 11, 2009. And everybody came down everywhere. People were fed, people were housed, people were supported emotionally. We didn't even know, right? People brought tables down to the street and made sandwiches and brought other food from their refrigerators, and people ate the food. And I'm like, I pray this won't happen. But we will only come together. And we will all stand. And that could happen. But that will happen. Again, just me, just me.
Steve stole my line of questioning. I wasn't going to go there, but Steve opened the door for me to ask you in that sense of the dishonesty, the misinformation, how it would be combated. I was going to open up the lecture with what Thomas Jefferson said, that if it were left to him to decide if we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. And so, for the First Amendment, of course, you know, that's why people want it, or that's why the people for the Constitution wanted to have freedom of the press. Later on in his life, years later, he responded by saying, he grew deeply cynical, writing that a person who never reads a newspaper is better informed than one who does, since the latter is filled with falsehoods. And so, what brought it to mind in that line of questioning what Steve was saying is that I just read that the governor has started, who has signed a bill about the SAVE Act, what's going to be federal, but Florida's own way of the SAVE Act, when 97.3% statistics show that there has been no fraud in voting in the state of Florida, but they pushed through this bill because people have been informed or have been constantly barraged with a narrative that the elections are rigged or they're not good, when they are. So having it on in the media and constantly pounding about fake elections and elections are not good, how do you combat that type of narrative as a single person, who wants to, I know you said to write to the stations and things like that, but aren't the stations, shouldn't they be required to have some type of, okay, I see that look.
Fairness doctrine no longer exists. You know what? I'm gonna answer this two ways. Advertisers. They want to tell you as many times as possible about what it is they're selling. And eventually, you're gonna go buy it. Right? That's the whole thing. Same with PR. You know, they're gonna tell you this about this person, and you're gonna believe it. You don't know why. nothing to do with the press. That's on the government. That's on the elected officials who abrogate their responsibility to their constituents, to their own personal and in-group collective ideology. So, I mean, the SAVE Act is probably going to become law, not just here in Florida. Because we no longer have control over the people. And they don't care what we think. Clearly. But that's not, maybe the press could do a better job doing its job and digging a little beyond the surface than they do. Not even a little dig. That's your job. Talk to people that don't want to say that. The type of story, there's not some things there's not another side to. Like genocide. We can't, yeah, it's either right or wrong. So the news has always been, well, there's always two sides to the story. Not really, not anymore. And the job of the media is to be as objective as possible, and to dig as deeply based on the information that's out there as they can. And I will blame the media for a lot of things. Just the rise of this current administration. It started out that every report before the 2016 election was like a joke. Oh, he's so funny. That'll never happen. It's taken a while, but it's happening. And yet they still report on him like, that'll never happen. He's such a jokester. I will blame the media for that. He doesn't need to be in every news story. There's so much other news that needs to be covered that's not being covered. And locally, nationally, internationally. But we're broken. We're broken. I don't have a better answer.
In politics, we say there's no such thing as bad press.
As what press?
Bad press.
Bad. Well, that's.
As long as you keep something out there and you turn on the TV, my wife says, all you hear is, you see this all the time, that's because it's the vein, you keep it up there and people gravitate to it. So, I'm sorry, one more question
let's have the family question.
I'm sorry, did you want?
That's your question, man.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So as a Black journalist and talking about dishonest truth and a woman, do you feel that there's a line in reporting cultural issues and that kind of news that you are seeing more as, say, like an activist rather than a journalist?
Yes. And I'm glad about
And
that.
didn't that take away from the truth of?
Well, it didn't happen in my life, in my career.
Right.
But there are the digital media, social media, those locations on the dial, if you will, where people can report on things that are important to them. And I don't know that I would call it activism. I would just call it news of interest to a specific demographic. And it is specific. It's not necessarily designed for everybody. And that's okay. Because what's been programmed to everybody isn't necessarily for everybody. So I don't see it as any different, it's, they're just different venues. I mean, the questions, the ethics questions and the questions of accuracy and that the card catalog librarian brought us, I think those apply, always, no matter if, it's kinfolk, skinfolk, or not. So, but I will say, if you're, as a person working in mainstream media, you come in with stories that are black stories all the time. Someone's gonna pull you aside and go, the kind of thing that maybe could you not, I kid you not. Same with women's stories, women-oriented stories. Yeah, same thing. Or if all of my experts are women. Hey, Dana, you notice that all experts that you invite to, the interview, they're all women, but they're all black people. Like, well, maybe if you interviewed black and black people and women, it wouldn't be incumbent upon us to do it ourselves.
It seems like their perception would be, you're an activist or you're a feminist because you're reporting that, instead of a journalist.
Part of the thing that was important to me when I was a journalist was that Rolodex of people. Why are we always seeing the same people who are our experts? Yeah, they are experts, but there are more experts. I mean, you need an accountant during tax time? I'm gonna call my Filipino friend, who's a CPA. I'm gonna call my Vietnamese friend, who's a CPA. Why is it always the same guy? Sorry, guys. But yes, you get labeled an activist within your organization. Whatever.
The system is set up for us.
Yeah.
We have a question in the back.
You've been so patient.
You got time?
And you had the mic going down.
And we don't wanna
Got time?
limit, but we do.
Okay. Okay. How do you feel about AI in regards to the newsroom safeguards? And then how do you make sure that the whole truth is being told when it comes to the AI? Because I know a lot of journalists and in the newsrooms are using AI, incorporating more of AI into their workflow, and at some point it's going to maybe take over their workflow. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
That's a great question. It's a source, right? Just like any news source. You take that information and you corroborate it elsewhere. You go to 4 people. If you get the same information that AI is giving you, you got something. I don't wanna ban it outright, but I think it's a source. And it's just that when it becomes your only source, then it's a problem, and a big problem. I worry about it in school, from the littles to the, postdocs. I mean, it's a source, and for that, I think it serves a purpose. I also then, worry on the backside, on the business side of that source, it's sucking up all of our energy, right? It's a danger to our environment, to our living. So that's another thing, but I do think it is a source, and it can be used accordingly. But when it takes over in that skeleton byline, that's a problem. Unless it's reporting on AI. Right?
Yes, thank you.
You don't have another one?
I got plenty. Does anybody have any questions?
No. Well, thank you so much, Dana, for, again, can we just give her an applause? I was honored when she said yes.
since I left, and I was happy to
Well,
be.
you know, in that response too, she's also a sculptress. She's done sculptures for quite a few noted characters or people that many of us may not have heard of, but she has busts of several great people, and one that she's just working on now. Life-size bronze bust.
No, just the bust, the whole body.
The whole body.
The whole body.
Incredible, and maybe we will have a lecture on that. So, the lecture series, as you well know, is free, but I do ask for any donations that could help us along with this. And if you find it in your heart to give us donations, thank you very much. And we will continue on our lecture series next month. Yeah, we've got it ready.
No, don't have it ready. Sorry.
Jessica Headley.
And I'm Brian Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I am Herman Cole, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, and Vietnam vet. Our history, the history of our Black race, is being erased and rewritten as we speak. We're being taken out of history. I'm here to tell you the facts about Blacks in the military, the segregation, the racism, the discrimination had to endure, experience it, 100 years of us. I think you'll be, and I hope that you will be here. Thank you.